News, it is exactly 6:36 a.m. An indication that we need to have our newspaper review just to have a look at some of the stories that have made the headlines in different newspapers. Of course, as usual, we start with the Standard newspaper, then later on move to the Nation and the Star newspaper. And this morning, I'm joined by Mark Bichachi, a communication strategist. I don't even know why I started with you. It should be ladies first, but good morning.
Because I'm the only gentleman.
But good morning.
Good morning, how are you? We are meeting the two-thirds rule today.
You're meeting the two-thirds rule today.
Yes, we are. Yes.
And of course, also joining us is Brenda Mdivo, who's a lawyer. And thank you so much, lady and gentlemen.
Thank you.
This morning, and I hope so far you had a brilliant week.
So far, so good.
Despite all the dramas that happening in this country.
I am still sad. I went to Baringo.
Yeah, and I saw that interview that you had with my colleague Ben Kitili on Sunday.
It's the most traumatizing thing I've ever been through.
Yeah. All right, let's have a look at the Standard newspaper, and we'll begin with. I mean, there are so many stories that I wanted to discuss about when it comes to the Standard newspaper. But let's begin first, as usual, our tradition, with that front page story that talks about the shock of disparity in county varsity intake. And there's a lot of disparities. We're seeing that students from the northeastern region, their intake to public and private university is so low. And like students from Kisii, Nairobi, Uasin Gishu, Kiambu, Nakuru have the highest intake. Clearly, it's an indication that there is a lot of disparity when it comes to education matters in the institutions of learning. And I really don't know what the government is going to do to ensure that this disparity actually doesn't exist. I'll start with you, Joy.
Thank you so much. The problem, I think, with this, I haven't read the article, but I'm just trying to think back to the days when I was in university. Sometimes some of these factors that end up in such numbers could be more, it's a combination of things. One, I think there's a cultural aspect. There's some areas in this country where education is very highly prized, and parents push their children because this is something that they want to achieve. There are other areas in this country where if you finish standard 8, it's an achievement. By the time you're doing form 4, I mean, you deserve a prize. So university education is not as highly prized. So there's the matter of the ambition of the students, the ambition of the parents, and then also there is access to opportunity. How many people have actually qualified from those areas so that you can say, okay, fine, maybe are they being denied spots? So maybe if I read the article and have a little bit more insight, I'll be able to see where they're coming from. But when I look at the numbers, some of these areas you can tell, even when you're looking at the numbers in secondary education, you have a lot of students in those areas. They're high population areas. And if there's high population, you would expect a high conversion rate as well.
But part of the story that has been done by two colleagues indicates that, I mean, even some of the universities within these counties, the counties ensure that universities within their county, majority of the students who are considered first are from that
particular county.
Yes, and yet we are talking about, especially within the lower education level, that's primary transiting to secondary, there has to be that integration. Move from your county, go to another university. But what we are seeing here from this story is that county governments are pushing for their own to have the first slots, and that means it's actually hindering other students from other counties.
And I think it's one of the criticisms of devolution, because we saw every single county converting the local polytechnic into a university, establishing a university. And when you start a university, what's the first thing we saw? Remember the saga we had with, what university was this? Moi University. When they tried to get in push for their own non-local to head it. Devolution has gotten us to a place where it has entrenched ethnicity to a large extent. And even if the university decided, okay, let's be professional and bring in as many people as possible, the hue and cry from the local population on whom they depend for their own survival is going to be large. But so some of those things, like I said, is societal expectations as well. If a university is in Kakamega, the people of Kakamega expect that it's our children who will go in there first.
But Bichachi, don't you think this blocks out potential students? Because of course it means that university is already full. A student from another county can't join.
Exactly.
There are a number of things that it does, and we need to be very careful to understand that integration is what makes a society better. Kenya is a better society because we integrated Indians and now we enjoy chapatis as a very basic level. We integrated with people and that's why we have tea. So we integrated with people and that's why githeri is eaten from coast to Kisumu. So you cannot ignore the benefits of integration in any society. And what's the purpose of our university? The purpose of our university is not just to open your eyes to books, but to open your eyes to a diverse society. So when our universities become monotonous, we stand the danger of further entrenching tribalism, but even then we also stand the danger of continuing the bad manners each of our counties has, because then what we are doing is we are basically learning from each other. This is what I mean. If in university 10 out of 12 students was from my region, then when I become governor 10 out of 12 CEOs will be from my region, 10 out of 12 PAs will be from my region. And then what happens is you begin to create that culture that certain people count more. But at the same time, we cannot ignore what Joy said. There is a very big issue in this country, that a lot of this country has not been integrated into the experiment called Kenya. A lot of the parts of this country have never seen a road. They don't know how a policeman looks like, and they give them.
And there's some part of the counties where some presidents don't even know how a car looks like. They've never seen a car.
Forget
so
a
how
car.
they are aspiring
if you give
to
them
university.
200 shillings, they wonder what you've given them, because they've never seen that much currency. So you understand that if you look at these places that are at the bottom, Mandera, Wajir, Lamu, Tana River, Isiolo, you realize all of these places are the people that suffer the worst of the ravages of poverty. So the marginalization, again, is also ethnic, because if you look at the ethnic imbalance in this country and who we consider the enemies in this country, I'll not say on public TV, you'll also see it's reflected here. And that's the problem that we have in this country. So the only solution is, number one, a university is a national asset.
So it needs to have
representation. Needs to have representation of the nation.
Okay, let's have a look at page 7 of the Standard newspaper. And I was actually having this discussion yesterday with our panelists in the morning, and what I'd said is actually what has happened. There's a lot of uproar from the public, from the civil servants. So now warning the salaries and remuneration team, the new team, not even to dare slash the allowances that they've been given. And now they're threatening actually to to go to court should the SRC slash the payments.
You know, part of trade law, labor union laws, is that once you have given an employee certain allowances or perks or benefits, you can only remove them on consensus. So, for example, if the company is doing badly, you tell them, look, it's either we all take a 15% pay cut so that we can survive, or I have to retrench some of you. So, by agreement, the employer and the employees can say, you know what, because this is unsustainable, let us go ahead and reduce this and that perk. We can survive with just this, for the sake of the company. What we are seeing the SRC doing, as Kenyans we can understand it, because wage bill is something that we have sung and sung until the cows have come home. There's too much money we are paying to recurrent expenditure. However, I would expect the SRC to be a little bit more diplomatic in how they implement this. Now, with the unions trying to dig in their heels and insist that don't touch our allowances or else.
Actually, the union Secretary General, that is Tom Odegi, who's also a member of Parliament, said that they were not consulted when it comes to this, decision by SRC to slash some of their allowances. But Joy, what caught my attention is that some of the allowances that SRC wants to cut, and if you read yesterday's Standard newspaper, some of the allowances are just interesting. We have animal allowance, which I was wondering. Animal allowance, like, is it because someone is handling animals, or
maybe you're living off animals?
I mean, some of the allowances, the list that were given, you're like,
what is all this about?
I wish I was a civil servant.
And that's the point I was trying to make. The civil servants need to understand, Kenya has gotten to a place where our coffers are running dry. If they do not negotiate some of these things and find a way of cushioning themselves in a way that works, they may find, okay, fine, we will leave the allowances, but the next thing will be we have to reduce the number of people who are working. So because this money has to come back some way. But the thing that I wish SRC would do is follow through plus with our politicians. Because it would be unfair if you're targeting the lower cadre civil servants, and we have people here who are demanding to sleep in 5-star hotels when they come to parliament. And we all know they have a house in Nairobi. We all know that they all have a house in Nairobi. But no, the one we put up in, we have to come to a place where SRC, as a constitutional commission, just bites the bullet and does its job.
Right, but Michechi, you know, some of these allowances are not even for the junior civil servants.
Yes.
These allowances enjoyed by their bosses, even at times don't even touch their salary. They end up, they just live on their allowances.
When you talk to someone in government who has the title director, secretary, those things, when they tell you their basic salary, you will faint. Because it's between 150 and 250,000, okay? Which for Joy Mdivo, who's a consultant, that's one meeting. So you wonder why someone would quit consultancy to go become director, this, secretary, that. The answer is a thing called per diem and allowances. Because you get on a plane, you come back a millionaire, okay? And you didn't even carry the pens to write the notes that you were supposed to write when you were there.
You come as
you went with staff.
Yes. You come back with Gucci bags and Louis Vuitton bags. That's what you do. Because these allowances, to be honest, have run amok in this country. The reason why we have benchmarking trips all over the place is because of per diem. The reason why when we go
and
to
don't forget about not only per diem, but also sitting allowance.
Yes,
you're given an allowance.
Exactly what we've hired you for.
Yes, appearance fees like a socialite. That's what this country is hemorrhaging on. And it's not just in the civil service, it's in state officers as well. It's in parliament. Okay, parliamentarians want to be paid to sit in a committee.
But remember also the allowances were slashed.
No, but the thing is this, we hired them to sit in those houses. We hired them to sit in those committees. What is the work of an MP? That's exactly your job. So we pay you for your job, then we pay you to turn up for work.
Come on. And then if you look at your TV set today, when KBC goes to parliament, how many empty chairs are there? No matter what it is they're discussing, whether they're discussing our border with Somalia, which is very important, or discussing the fate of 2/3 gender rule or Migingo, the only thing that you're sure will have 100% turnout is their own salaries and benefits. So the biggest issue we have in this country is we are hemorrhaging money hand over fist.
So are you supporting the SRC to slash this 140
I support the SRC with a condition, with a very serious rider, that it applies to state officers and to parliament as well as to the civil service.
But you know, when you talk about parliament, it means again the allowances are going to be slashed again, because initially they were earning a lot when it comes to allowances, sitting allowance per diem.
They're still earning a lot.
And of course, even their sittings were also reduced by the former, the immediate former SRC led by Sarah Serem. So slashing it again, I mean, it will cause a lot of debate, but let's not even go there.
Let me ask a simple question to the average Kenyan. If your take-home salary was 600,000 and you paid all your bills, how much change would you have left over? That's the only question you have to ask. Before you talk about allowances, is the salary enough for a parliamentarian to do what they do? The answer is yes, it is. Because, listen, let me put it like this. Let me explain to Kenyans. If you want an ambassadorial house somewhere in Karen or Runda or wherever, it will not set you back more than 200,000 shillings per month, okay? Two, if you want to shop at the most expensive supermarkets for your wife and children and yourself, it will not cost you more than 200,000. Meaning on your 600,000, you still have 200,000 shillings left to basically go to Kempinski and eat dinner.
I know where you're heading to, Bichachi. No, but in short,
our MPs
have their salaries.
But our MPs have also become our local source of Harambee funds. They have become bursary.
That's not their role.
Like where I come from in Western, the bad manners, people wake up and by now they're already in the home of the MP, waiting for tea before they go to their various activities. But the MPs need to also win their constituents off that handout mentality. That mentality is what is also killing the MPs. Because they tell you, all our money is going back into the constituency. Why is it doing that? Bring development to your constituencies and they will not need to come back to your home.
Okay, now let's put the Standard newspaper aside for a while and we go straight to Nation. I believe all of us have Nation newspaper.
Yes.
And we'll start with that Kimwarer Aror Dam scandal, the mega scandal that we have seen different amounts being mentioned, 7 billion, 21 billion. But what the DCI investigative agencies are going with, it's they're working with 21 billion shillings public funds that I really don't know that we say misappropriated or let me say lost, because the dams have not been built, stolen. The dams have not been built. And if you look at the Nation, it says that 3 CS's cabinet secretaries faced the sack, arrest in the dams probe. But when you open page 4 of that story, the Nation newspaper, it actually doesn't mention the names of these CSs, but the front page actually gives the faces of the CSs that have so far been interrogated by the DCI. We have Henry Rotich, CS Treasury. We have Agriculture Committee, that Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Mwangi Kiunjuri. But of course, Kiunjuri was mentioned because of his time during when he was the devolution CS. Then we have Chelugui, CS Water, and his counterpart Eugene Wamalo for devolution. And then now the person who poured hot water into all this was I mean, the Cabinet Secretary Peter Munya, saying that he was being forced to sign things that he questioned, and he says, and that pressure is coming from some Jubilee officials from the Jubilee administration, which I'm sure it will bring a lot of, debate. But our focus is on these 3 CSs. Why can't this DCI actually tell Kenyans these are the 3 CSs that we are now working with in terms of we want them sacked or step aside or arrested for, this dam scandal?
When I see such a headline, part of me wants to be like a Kenyan and get very annoyed. But the intellectual part of me says, wait a minute, where is the smoking gun?
Yeah.
The last 2 or 3 weeks, we were treated to a furore. Every single day, there was another headline, and another headline, and another headline, and another headline. Then when we were done, there was nothing. It was like the smoke on a stage when there's a concert. It looks very huge, and then after a while you realize, oh, by the way, it was not really smoke, it was something else. What I've realized in Kenya, we peddle these things and make them look very sensational, and it helps people to sell newspapers. But when you distill it at the bottom, what are you left with? Let me give you an example. When we were doing NYS2, this Ngirita one, what were the sums we're talking about? 9 billion, was it? Or 8 billion?
9 billion.
These guys are in court, and when you look at the charges of everybody who's been brought in NYS2, we are talking about 100 million. What happened to the other 9.8 billion that we were told is there? So I have come to a place where I'm taking these things from DCI with a pinch of salt. Some of them I think are leaked, sensational, this and that, because if there are going to be arrests, why didn't they just keep quiet until after they've arrested people, and then we can say, okay, fine, there is an arrest of this one and this one and so on and so on. But what you're giving us is innuendo and a lot of smoke and mirrors, because is there something going on? Yes, there is. Are you investigating? Yes, we are. Where is it going to end up? It's going to end up in court. Can't you give us something more concrete to hold on to? Because I've gotten to a place where I've realized some of these headlines, and I'm not saying this to disparage your rival newspaper, but some of these headlines, at the end of the day, agitate Kenyans, spoil our name to the rest of the world, and then we end up with fluff at the end of the day. I wish the investigative journalists would take their time and say, in documents that we have seen, in reports that we have confirmed, instead of this smoke and mirror reporting that we are being entertained with.
All right, and Bichachi, if you look at that story in page 4, still on the CSs, the 3 CSs that face sack or arrest in the 21 billion shillings dam. Page 4, what caught my attention is, if you look at it's not the first, the second, the third, but the 5th paragraph, after where it's been written economic crimes, the 5th paragraph that says, so complex have the investigations been that detectives in Nairobi sought the assistance of UK's national crime agencies, whose mandate is to investigate organized and economic crimes across regional and international borders. Does it mean that as a country, we cannot do this such that we have to seek help from outside? And it's not only the UK also, but the investigative authority has also been has also sought help from the Italian government to trace the directors of the troubled company that has been awarded a tender to build the 2 dams. That is CMC, and the company that was given that mandate and has actually abandoned the work even before they begin it.
Well, there are a few things here that Kenyans need to understand. That number one, that our investigative past is not something that we can be very proud of. Goldenberg, Anglo leasing, you name it.
The chicken gate scandal.
The chicken gate scandal. So Akasha's, the Kenya Power scandals. So definitely the Kenyan, the office of the DPP, the office of the DCI does need support, both internationally and in terms of just empowering its staff, training its staff, increasing the number of staff. There's a lot of gaps, okay, there. If I was to give Kenyans an estimate, the Robert Mueller investigation into Trump's collusion with Russia cost the United States government $35 million US, okay?
That's a lot of money.
That's $3.5 billion. Now my question is, do we have $3.5 billion to investigate?
We don't have money.
We don't have that money.
Yeah.
So yes, they do need help. And I think it is not the fault of the DCI when these investigations end up with 100 million instead of 9 billion. And the reason for that is very simple. And I'll give Kenyans a very simple story. There's a guy called Al Capone. He was a racketeer, he was a brothel owner, he was a drug dealer, he was a murderer, he was many, many things. But he was jailed for tax evasion because that's the only thing the FBI could find on him. Now, if you follow the complexity of how these damn deals were done, you realize that it's a very complex mix of things, because you are told that money was sent to Italy. How it appeared in Dubai and Rwanda, we do not know. So the reality is that this is a very complex issue.
And that is
However,
that is the same thing that the investigative authorities are saying, that when they thought they had gotten the people they wanted to arrest and take them to court, they realized this thing is more complex. It has more people than they thought. And hence the question, because it's being said that it also comes at a time when the president is expected to have this, is supposed to address parliament next week.
Yeah, the state of the nation.
And there, expectation or speculation that the president might say, if you're a cabinet secretary who's serving in my administration and you've been mentioned in a scandal, or you're probably supposedly going to be mentioned in a scandal, step aside. Because that's the same thing we saw him do in 2015 when the former cabinet secretaries, Kinangilu, Kazungu Kambi, being told to step aside, and they did indeed step aside. So are we likely to see also the president go that route next week when he addresses parliament?
It will be difficult, and I want to give Uhuru some credit, because I have taken time to think about this for a little while. Remember when he fired Ngilu and the rest, and then what happened after that? There was nothing. Right? So who ended up with egg on face? The president of the Republic
In fact,
of Kenya.
even raised it with the former CEO of ESCC at State House, when he told him, you gave me a list, I fired them, but there was nothing.
And that makes my first point.
Yes, and that's the same
Our
issue
investigators don't follow through. In fact, I've reached a place, I told myself, until I see convictions, the rest of it is kizungu mingi and catwalk. Because we've gotten to a place where we give people things to excite them. It's almost like we want to be seen that we are working. So we create headlines, but we don't follow through. Even the DCI, when they started investigating this damn business, they didn't have to leak those stories to the media. They could have gone ahead and done the investigations thoroughly, because that's what we see other investigators doing. Stealth. That element of surprise, when you blow it up, if there's somebody who's culpable, they have time to go and cover their tracks. By the time you're coming, there's all manner of roadblocks. But when you speak out too early, then when the rubber meets the road, you find you cannot follow through. Even if you're on the right track, you cannot follow through with what you're doing. And I agree with Mark. Some of the people who are working at DCI, do they have the sufficient, not just the money, even the sufficient aptitude to deal with this? You're dealing with people who are doing economic crimes. They're not stupid. The person investigating them has to be 2 steps ahead of them in terms of thinking. Do we have people with sufficient aptitude and training to do that work? Sometimes I think maybe even our investigators are a little bit dull. By the time they catch up to so this is what we are dealing with. Do this 5 steps away.
All right.
So we need to come to a place how our entire culture in how we deal with economic crimes has to change. And that's why even the recovery rate is so low that even if you get somebody in jail, getting that money back becomes ridiculousness.
All right.
I'm glad now that they're trying to follow the money. But even when you follow the money, it's not as simple as we've seen it in that bank. Getting it out of that bank back to Kenyan coffers It's a process.
Yeah, okay. Now, page 5, away from that, page 5 of Nation newspaper. Wow, this story, when I read it in the morning in the newsroom, I had so many questions. And that is, you mean we have a lot of land to give? You know?
Kuna machamba.
Tuko na mashamba mingi sana. Tunapatiana kujeni ujenge port. So Kenyans are wondering, like, why did we really have to give Uganda that land and say, let that dry port be built in Nakuru County? Why not any other county? Of course,
but
we're talking about phase 2
it was already set aside. Those already set aside.
Yes, but did you
land
really
for
have
an
to
inland
give it
port
out?
But now you know it's Uganda is gonna pay for it, even though it's going to be
How
here.
sure are we Uganda is going to pay for
okay,
it?
let's hold up. Let's take a step back
Yes.
and look at the mathematics. Okay, the largest trading partner
With
with
Kenya.
Kenya
It's
is Uganda.
Yes.
It's a place we send most of our goods, we trade most with. In fact, I saw someone complaining that there's a lot of Ugandan goods now coming into Kenya, but please check for the last 40 plus years how many Kenyan goods have been in Uganda. So the trade imbalance is in our favor. Okay. In fact, if Kenyans were to complain, they should complain about the Chinese, where we have 90% trade imbalance. Okay, in the opposite direction, that we give them, bring in 90% goods, we give them 10% back. So there's definitely that. Number two, we need to know that there's been a very there's an arms race, what's a road race, an infrastructure race between Kenya and Tanzania. Okay, where Tanzania had offered their SGR for Uganda to move their goods through Tanzania. Now, if Uganda moves its goods through Tanzania, a lot of the revenue we enjoy at the port is gone. Okay, because Uganda is landlocked. So for me, if Uganda and Kenya are going to partner and build this inland port, which we are going to build anyway, for the benefit not just of Kenya, but for the benefit of Uganda, if we are going to partner and do it, then it does two things. Number one, it solidifies our economic position in as far as the movement of goods and services is concerned. And number two, it gives us an ally who cannot withdraw 10 years from now from our agreement. And that is important, especially when you consider the maritime disputes that we have. If you consider the kind of position we find ourselves in, we are at a place where we need as many allies as possible.
As much as we need as many allies as possible, Joy, do you think it will cut down the cost, in terms of the amount we're supposed to spend in building the phase 2 of SGR that's supposed to be from is it Nakuru? From Nairobi to Nakuru? To Nakuru, yeah.
To Kisumu, I think.
To Kisumu.
To Kisumu. We've had a problem with securing additional funding from the Chinese to finish that phase, because it's a place where we're not agreeing with them. And if the president has been trying to find out where can I get the extra money to bridge the gap that the Chinese are not willing to pay for, Uganda is a logical partner, because they'll be the biggest beneficiary. Remember during the 2007-2008 dispute, the post-election dispute, one of the things that happens that people walingoa really, for lack of a better word, in Kibera. So they plucked the railway, and so Ugandans could not get basic necessities because of the disablement of the rail. So if the SGR is in place, if the pipeline is in place, and then they're able to get their oil guaranteed and their goods guaranteed, and then they have an inland port such that when the stuff comes, it gets to Naivasha, and then now from Naivasha is when they're transporting it to Uganda. Even for them, it will be more cost effective. So for us, it makes sense to tell our neighbor, look, don't let us carry this burden alone. Let's carry this burden with you, because at the end of the day, you benefit from it as much.
I think it's going to be like a 50-50 share cost.
Not exactly, but it looks like Uganda is going to chip in into also the progress of the SGR. Because from what I heard the president and President Museveni talking about, it looks like if we get it to Kisumu, there'll be effort to get it to Malaba. So that even the goods don't have to do any road transport in Kenya. They can go directly to the border from Mombasa. That would be a win-win.
And you know, there are other bilateral agreements that were signed on Wednesday night when the two heads of state met. And one that will cause a lot of uproar, especially from the region you come from, Joy, the western region. is the
chicken.
fact that, not leave alone even the chicken, sugar exports to Kenya will increase from 36,000 tons to 90,000 tons. Yet we have sugar factories that are dying. The farmers have not been paid.
But that's a question of mismanagement of our own factories.
So we prefer as
it's
a
not
country
a question that we don't need the sugar.
We prefer as a country to bring sugar from our neighboring country at the expense of local farmers.
Now, you see, this is the irony for me, that Kenyans complain how much Museveni is a dictator, but Museveni has figured out how to get sugar into Kenya, how to get milk into Kenya,
and chicken
into Kenya, and eggs into Kenya. You see, the thing is, let's be very honest.
And at the end of the day, it's actually Ugandan farmers who are going to benefit at the expense of Kenya's farmers.
Of course.
But now that's a lesson to us.
Let's be clear. Number one, we are part of the East Africa community, which is a free trade area.
Yes.
Okay. Now, as a free trade area, legally speaking, Uganda can bring all the sugar and supply what Kenya needs. After all, by the way, let's flip the coin. That is what Kenya has done for a long time. In fact, Museveni asked a question. He said there used to be a factory in Webuye on the way to Bungoma, in a place near Turbo. You remember? And he said, I'm buying papers from Europe. Okay, why aren't I buying it from Kenya? The issue is this, that number one, Kenya is doing the right thing in terms of opening its market to its neighbors. That's what we agreed to, and we are gentlemen and we honor our agreements. What Kenya is doing a mistake is that we have self-hate, self-destructive tendencies that we do not realize. Look at the factories. When we say we want to bail out Mumias, okay, Mumias was supplied sugarcane. It sold sugarcane. Why wasn't the farmer paid?
So as we speak right now, you know, sugar exports to Kenya from Uganda to increase from 36,000 tons to 90,000 tons.
Yes.
So are you saying that let farmers or politicians or Kenyans not raise
the man has a point.
Yes.
I'm letting him finish.
You see, the thing is, we have the factories. We sold the sugar. It is we who didn't pay. You see, all these things, including Kenya Airways. Have you ever boarded a plane that was empty? No, it was not. It has passengers. So what is the problem? The problem is we cannot steal from ourselves and blame the Ugandans for getting their act right. It does not work like that. You cannot cook bad food for your children and complain when they eat at the neighbors. That's the problem.
All right, and then, you know, part of the bilateral deal, it was also that they'll resume exports of poultry to Kenya within weeks. And already the Kenyan market is flooded with eggs from Uganda. And Kenyan, you know, poultry farmers are wondering, where are we going to sell our eggs?
No, but you see also, buttressing the point that Bichachi made earlier, we Kenyans are very good at, I don't even know why, I like the word, self-hate.
Yes.
We sabotage ourselves. For example, let's take eggs, for example. It had gotten to a place where the poultry farmers were used to having this thing of creating artificial shortages. Then it goes to a place where even one egg is 20 bob, as in ridiculously expensive. And so egg also became like a luxury. In fact, I really laughed yesterday, where some bachelor said he used to put baking powder in his eggs so that the food it becomes a lot, so one egg stretches, because it had become a luxury commodity. And people are looking and saying, no, actually, if you produce this thing cost effectively, it shouldn't be that expensive. So what happens? Uganda are bringing in eggs. In fact, in Western, there are places where an egg is 6 bob, 5 bob. In the city now, if you get an egg over 10 bob, somebody is stealing from you. As Kenyans, we need to come to a place where things become realistic. Right now, everything is overpriced in Kenya because everybody is such a capitalist. Houses are overpriced. Our transport is overpriced. Everything is overpriced. We need to come to a place where we start making fiscally sound investments and fiscally sound developments.
All right.
Our capacity to produce has not diminished. Problem is when we price ourselves out of the market. If across the border, something is so cheap that once it crosses, it nullifies what you have done, there is something wrong.
All right, but the good thing about this deal is that Uganda also lifted ban on beef imports from Kenya. After the outbreak of mad cow disease that was there.
And we didn't have any mad cow disease, but it was an excuse.
But we need to take a short break. We'll be right back. And even as we take it, the short break, I was just wondering why Migingo Island was not. They did, but not to that extent that Kenyans are Kenyans are like with bated breath. We're going to know what these two leaders have said about the Migingo Island. But at least so far we know when our Foreign Affairs Cabinet Secretary, Monica Juma, and Sam Kutesa of Uganda met, they said they have a 3-month plan on how they're going to resolve it. So let's just wait and see how the 3 months
what will work.
Yeah, what will work out and what will not work out. Taking us to a short commercial break.